I'm very excited to hear what you have about happiness and burnout. And as you probably know already, the almighty dollar is not always the root
Right.
of happiness. This episode is sponsored by Agent CRM. If you're in sales and tired of paying 3, 4, or 5 different companies for your email, CRM, funnels, phone, follow-up automation, check out Agent CRM. It's an all-in-one tool that combines all that you need to reach out, nurture, and close your clients. They've got weekly support calls so you can get up and running in no time. Get a free 14-day trial by going to the link below in the show notes. Hey, welcome to the Attention Entrepreneur podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. He has founded and scaled several multi-million dollar businesses. In 2015, he reached financial success, but was burned out and struggling to find sustainable happiness. From that point on, he decided to make a drastic change in his life that has propelled his success, including finishing a Master of Applied Positive Psychology from the University of Pennsylvania and studying under Dr. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology. Combining his entrepreneur expertise with his unique positive psychology background, he's developed an entrepreneur's 8 laws to eliminate unhealthy stress, flourish personally, and create the good life. His upcoming book, Entre Thrive, specializes in helping entrepreneurs achieve happy, satisfying, meaningful lives through their keynotes, Entre Circle, Master Learning Forums, and courses. I do want to welcome to the show, Aaron Marcum.
Pleasure to be here, Dan. Excited to get into this, and I love the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for hanging out with us, and I'm very excited to hear what you have about, you know, um, happiness and burnout. And as you probably know already, the almighty dollar is not always the root
Right.
of happiness. So I'm very excited to hear what you have to say once someone has got there but has not had a fulfilled life. But before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts, can you share a little bit about yourself and how you
Yeah,
got to where
yeah.
you're
You
today?
did a nice job there. I appreciate it. But yeah, I've been an entrepreneur for 22 years. Started my first company in 2002, a home care agency. And in healthcare, burnout is a common thing, right? And stress and taking care of other people can be stressful in and of itself. I was 28 years old when I started my first company. And I first 3 years, and we had, I believe, 3 kids at the time. I have 6 kids now, but 3 kids then. Been married 27 years, so really proud of that. But I was going in, and into the office, regular working hours, come home, eat dinner, and then I would go back to work till like 2 a.m. And this was the grind, right? I was grinding it out. All the pressure I had to provide for my family, but also the people I was caring for and taking care of, and I was putting all this pressure on myself. Call it obsessive passion. It's not super healthy versus harmonious passion. Some good research done on that. But over the years, so I sold that company. I learned some things. I learned how to grow it, put systems in place. Still struggled. And one of the reasons I sold it is because I got burned out and I was ready to move on. I sold it to a public company. I mean, I had a pretty good exit with that company, but I started a new company with this burning desire to help raise the standard of care for the in-home care space. And so you can kind of look at that new company as like the JD Powers of home care. And we grew. Took us a few years to really kind of hit that exponential growth. But by 2015, we created quite the company that had a significant impact in the in-home care spape. But because of that, I hadn't learned from my first company. I was still grinding it out, right? I was like,
Yeah.
and I found myself in 2015 overweight, so like, I don't know, 30 pounds more than I probably should have weighed. And I was not healthy, not just physically, like mentally exhausted, a lot of challenges that way. And I had some good mentors, fortunately, one of them of which had just invested in the company, by the name of Dale Green, one of my favorite people on the planet. He has passed away in 2022 of cancer. But he really believed in me. We were good friends. He invested in the company, but he also helped me understand the importance of investing in my physical health. He was the type of guy, he'd be at the gym at 4 a.m. you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, he's very much into health, and he kind of helped me turn some things around. He started working with me at the gym, and I just started doing these little things, making these changes, but
Mhm.
also mentally. I was letting go of things in
Mhm.
my business. I was allowing people to take over. It was also the same year that we implemented the EOS, or Entrepreneurial Operating System. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Mhm.
Gina Wickman started that company, and I just started doing things to start letting go and growing my company. That's when I started cycling in 2016. I actually entered a 200-mile bike race. When I go all in, I go all in,
Oh, okay.
and so the very day I ordered my road bike, I never road bike before. I ordered my
Mhm.
road bike. I also registered for the 200-mile bike race 5 months later.
Uh,
So I went all in with that. I was like, I am going to get a hold of my health. I needed kind of
mhm.
something to work towards. Finished that race when a lot of people didn't think I would ever have a chance of finishing that race. And so that just was 2016 when I started investing in myself. It's like hockey stick
Mm.
growth in my company.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's the thing I want people to understand, is that if they really want financial success, and they want not just financial, but freedom of time,
Mhm.
and all these things, the four freedoms Dan Sullivan talks about, strategic coach, he's my coach.
Mhm.
It's freedom of time, money, relationships, and purpose. If
Mhm.
people want
Mhm.
those things in their life, they've got to invest in their personal well-being, in their own health and vitality, because that's what they're bringing into the workplace, into their
Mhm.
business. And if they're not doing those little things, like I wasn't doing those things early on in my businesses, and we would plateau. It's like constant plateaus because I was just
Mhm.
trying to grind it out and
Mhm.
not letting go. So anyway,
Mhm.
2016, rocket growth. And the one thing I'm trying to teach people is I use the word acceleration a lot. In fact, for in-home care providers, we have this program called the Breakaway Accelerator. And it's really this kind of, you can accelerate your personal and professional growth. By 2018,
Mhm.
I stepped down as CEO. We're talking 2 years. I
Mm.
stepped down as CEO. I took a 7-week sabbatical before I stepped down. We were testing whether my team was ready for that. They
Mhm.
were. I left my laptop in the office, didn't check in for 7 weeks at all. And that was that just changed me. And then in 2020, enrolled in the UPenn's positive psychology program because I wanted to know why some entrepreneurs thrive and why some don't. And I wanted
Mm.
to know the science. A lot of people misunderstand what positive psychology is. It's not the science of happiness. It's a
Mm.
science of why some people thrive and why some people don't. And
Mhm.
it's the psychology, it's kind of the proactive side of psychology.
Mhm.
Before
Mhm.
Martin Seligman and Chris Peterson they co-founded the positive psychology movement, along with Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the author of Flow.
Mhm.
It was like those
Mhm.
three are like
Mhm.
the three pillars of positive psychology.
Mhm.
And before 25, 30 years ago, psychology was so reactive, waiting
Mm.
for us to have problems. Well, positive psychology is the proactive. Martin Seligman, he was like, we've got to quit being reactive. We've got to be proactive when it comes to this.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's what that is. I got into it, applied to the program. I didn't think I'd ever have a chance of getting in at the age of 49,
Mhm.
and got in, very competitive. And it was a transformational journey for me. And the primary reason I got in there, and I did my whole capstone on this, is what makes an entrepreneur thrive, or what's
Mm.
the kind of keys to it. Fast forward, that's I was prompted to write a book about it after I graduated from that program. I continue to run companies. I'm an entrepreneur through and through, but I
Oh.
wanted to really kind of elevate entrepreneurs at every level
Mm.
with this book. As I continue to work in the in-home care space, I'm an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. I
Yeah.
have companies in that space, so
Yeah.
that's the journey. That's kind of the long, maybe a little bit long, but that's how, I got to where I am in a nutshell.
Sure, sure. And kind of through your journey, you've come across or created these 8 laws that um, can be used to get through burnout and increase happiness. And
Yes.
wanted to talk to you about these 8 laws and what they are and how business owners, entrepreneurs could apply them to their own lives so that they can take a 7-week sabbatical, take that vacation without the laptop and be okay with it.
Yeah. 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 I often ask the question, if you could take even 4 weeks, if you took 4 weeks off, couldn't check in, what would happen to your business
Mm-hmm.
during that time? And most people go, chaos, right? They would go, I
Mm-hmm.
can't leave for 4 weeks,
Yeah.
And so then we take a step back when you say, okay, then we've got to get to that point, which is the freedom of time. We've got to pull it all back and start with the first law. And the first law is what I call entre clarity. I use the word entre as short for entrepreneur. So when I say entre, that's what I mean. It's entrepreneurial clarity. And entrepreneurial clarity is figuring out what you really want out of life. What do you want to be true about yourself? When we start out with
Mm-hmm.
what's called guiding truths. So that's part of that law is, what are your guiding truths? I've had these for years. And these are the truths you want to be true about yourself. My truths, I have 9 of them. My mind is at peace. My actions reflect character. My family receives of my time. My
Mm-hmm.
ventures create freedom is another one. So I
Mm-hmm.
have these guiding truths that I lean into when I'm making decisions. And so that's where we start. I love the quote by Martin Luther King Jr. He goes like this. He says, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward. And so the crawl part of our well-being is that clarity. Like, let's get clear on what we want. And then we can start walking a little faster. And that walk part goes into the other laws. So once you get clear on that, and I go through all that in the chapter in that book in Entre Thrive, the second law is entre create. So entrepreneurial creativity. If an entrepreneur is not creating, is not blocking out time to create, their well-being suffers. How many of us can relate with a calendar that's just like all over the place? Like, we're meeting here, we're meeting there, we're rushing to another appointment, and we're just this back and forth, and we're not creating. We're not blocking that space to create. Well, science has shown, in fact, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi has some great research. He's passed away this last year, but he had some great research on creativity and the importance of creation, that we need to block and create that space to create some of our greatest things, personally and professionally. I call them deep thrive sessions. So I'm going all in a few times a week on journaling and creating and thinking about ideas, solving problems, and not booking anything in that period of time. I block out most of my mornings, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and all day Fridays. I only take appointments typically in the afternoon. There are some exceptions, occasionally a podcast or something like that. But for the most part, I block those times out for creativity. So that's the second law. Third law is grit. Grit, entrepreneurial grit. Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, is a great book. She actually was a guest lecturer. She went to my program, the same master's program that I have. She's a graduate of that program, and she has a lot of wonderful research on grit. Well, I've taken some of that plus other research and applied it to the entrepreneur, and came up with 5 phases of grit for an entrepreneur. And the deeper you get into each one of these levels or phases, the more staying power you have as an entrepreneur, the more grit you have. Too often, when we get burned out as an entrepreneur, or we're doing something over and over and we don't like what's happening, or there's challenges, if we're early on in those levels, then our likelihood of giving up goes up, right? And some of the best ideas never get out there because of this very issue. So the first level is curiosity, right? When we're first curious about a venture, an idea, that's the first level. Second one is interest. So express, knowledge, research. We're interested in this topic. We want to dive deeper into it. Then, once we're at that level and we want to go further, we say, okay, I'm going to launch this venture. We launch the venture, and that's the practice phase. Like, we've got to practice, trial and error, try different things. and really see if this is really what we want to do. And the problem with especially young entrepreneurs I have found, or those new to the entrepreneurial journey, you could be 50 years old and it'd be your first business you started, wherever you are in that
Yeah.
journey, is that when you're first starting it, that practice phase, they want to skip it. They want to get right to the fourth phase, which is passion. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't know if we're passionate about something until we've practiced it for a while,
Right. Right.
right? Once
Mm-hmm.
you get to the fourth phase, that's where a lot of entrepreneurs end up. It's the passion
Mm-hmm.
phase, and it's internal facing, where it's about us, which is great. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm passionate about this. I want to do this. It's more about you. And that's you have to go through that phase as an entrepreneur. But the
Mm-hmm.
fifth phase is the one that has the staying power, the most staying power, and that's the calling phase. When you feel called to do something, that's the impact you want to have on the community, on your team members. You feel called to help your customers. It just, that staying power, when you're called, you're far likely to get through all the obstacles. And so for an
Right.
entrepreneur to evaluate where they are at through that journey, I think is important. Anyway, that's the third one. I'll keep moving. The fourth one is connections, and those are your relationships. It's being congruent, present, and creating those daily high quality connections where you're really all in with your conversations, with your team, with your
Mm-hmm.
family. And I go through some best practices in that law, in that chapter, to say, okay, this is how you create deeper connections in your lives. And there's a lot of science as well as stories. Now, one thing I want to tell the
Mm-hmm.
audience here is that, yes, I use the science in the book, positive
Mm-hmm.
psychology, but I use a lot of stories. It's very
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
relatable with the
Yeah.
science. It's a great read that way. So just an FYI there. So connections, really
Mm-hmm.
important. The number one factor to our well-being are our connections, that
Mm-hmm.
contribute to our well-being. So that one
Yeah.
cannot be
Yeah.
understated. The fifth one is what I call faith, or entrepreneurial faith. And that's faith in yourself, faith in others, people who are willing to give you their trust, like Dale Green did for me way back
Mm-hmm.
when. And investing in the company. He was investing in me and not the product, right? He believed in me,
Mm-hmm.
and that that
Mm-hmm.
that meant so much to me. And then the third part of faith is faith in a higher power. Science has shown
Mm-hmm.
that our well-being is enhanced when we have faith in a higher power. So I go through all three of those phases in that chapter. The sixth law is habits, entre habits. And
Mm-hmm.
that's creating habits that align with what Chris Peterson and Martin Seligman call your character strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And having character strengths like love, curiosity, creativity, leadership, spirituality. And
Mm-hmm.
I talk about having those run in the background and creating them as habits as an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur. Really
Mm-hmm.
fascinating topic. I strongly recommend that chapter. It's really great. I won't go too detail into that. It's just
Yeah.
really, it's we talk about unconscious habits. Well, what if we could create character strengths unconsciously? Like they're just
Mm-hmm.
running in the background every day in our lives. It'd
Yeah.
be amazing. And
Yeah.
then the seventh law is vigor, entre vigor. And that's aligning your mind with your body and make sure your mind is in control of your body. A lot of Joe Dispenza's work focuses on that when it comes to mind and body alignment. I talk about the Mustang mind in that chapter, and that's the wild mind that entrepreneurs have to
Mm-hmm.
deal with on a day-to-day basis. We have to
Yeah.
tame, and I talk about
Yeah.
taming that mind. And the last one is the agency, entre agency.
Mm.
That's our free will. That's owning our choices, responsibility, not blaming others, of course, but also creating cultures in our workplaces that, one, where people can figure things out, empower them, autonomy, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Second is optimism, like creating a culture where every challenge is temporary. Like optimists look at every
Mm.
challenge as a temporary thing. And then the third part of that is the imagination, like creating cultures where imagination is flourishing, like people can use their imaginations and create, again, going back to that second law. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the 8 laws in the book. I give a lot of those, like in these, when I talked
Mm-hmm.
about it, because I want people to understand why these are so important. That when you're creating these in your life, and this is the good life Aristotle talks about, is when you're creating the good life and using these laws in your life, other areas like your business will flourish as a result.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about burnout. And sometimes um, we don't recognize the signs of burnout until kind of it's too late.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the symptoms, I suppose, or signals that one can hopefully have some self reflection or introspection? It's like, oh, I think I'm leading to burnout, and maybe I need to change something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the definition of burnout, a lot of people think it's like the number of hours you work, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the happiest people are working 50, 60 hours a week, but
Mm-hmm.
and work-life balance is a myth, right? In most cases. And so what we have to look at is the first thing I always look at is my relationships. And do I have the capacity to make the connections I want to make personally and
Mm-hmm.
professionally? And am I so busy that I'm just not making those types of connections with them? I call them high quality connections. Jane Dutton coined that term. But it's I think in your relationships, are they healthy? Are they strong? Burnout typically pushes your relationships away, and you usually don't find the time to really invest in them and spend the time you need in those relationships. Even in writing this book, there were times where I was like so into the book and writing the book that my relationship suffered as a result. I don't do any of this
Mm-hmm.
perfectly. I mean, just be
Yeah.
clear, that this
Yeah.
is something, this book was good for me to write, to say, and to continue to lean
Yeah.
into my guiding truths. The
Mm-hmm.
other things that I look for or that science has shown that is the cause of burnout is obviously health.
Mm-hmm.
That's another clear sign, is that overeating, snacking a lot. A lot of people eat out of stress, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're not taking the time to exercise. Um, Also, another sign, and this is something more recent that I've really been kind of talking more about, is that when we lead with emotions when it comes to our decisions, that's usually a sign of burnout. That we're
Mm-hmm.
not taking time to really dig into like the knowledge that we need to make an educated decision. We're just kind of letting our emotions take over.
Mm-hmm.
That's that body also, is our body is in control of our mind. So there's just a lot of different things that I think and a lot of the science would demonstrate this. For entrepreneurs, burnout leads to a lot of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
nervousness,
Mm-hmm.
feeling like we have to down the caffeine on a consistent basis. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
burnout there. And then the real obvious signs is like our evenings and our weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Like we if we're not present, like sometimes we're physically present, and I can relate with this as an entrepreneur. We're physically present but not mentally present, and so someone will be talking to us and we're thinking about work, right, in the evenings, our
Mm-hmm.
spouse or whoever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
That's again relationships. But can you take a weekend, and
Mm-hmm.
not even like open up your laptop and look at work? Those kinds of things I think are all signs of perhaps burnout. But you usually know. Everyone kind of knows those feelings, those yucky
Yeah.
feelings, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah,
So, kind of on the other side of the spectrum, happiness, right? So the way I'm kind of looking at it, right, there's kind of the middle part, right? Maybe neutral, and down here is unsatisfaction, which is maybe a result of burnout, and
yeah,
up here is happiness above the line.
yeah,
How can um, what are some steps based on maybe a combination of laws you've spoken, increase some of the happiness
yeah,
and recognize we want to do more of these things that make me happy, but
yeah,
at the same time, right, the businesses take care of, whether
yeah,
it's through delegation, and we all got to put food
yeah,
on our table and things like that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I happiness is so I see happiness as life satisfaction, right? Is how
Hmm. Hmm.
satisfied are we with life? And
Hmm.
I think it's a great thing to look at. Like I think
Hmm.
in the field of positive psychology, sometimes we downplay life satisfaction to say that's not the holy grail, or that's not where we should be going. That's not,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a stop along the way. Because happiness can be, and I see why, because life satisfaction is often dependent upon circumstances or what's
Mm-hmm.
going on
Mm-hmm.
in your business. Like if your business has challenges, then maybe your happiness is fleeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so what I would like to get to in my life, or like I continue to try to strive for, and I mention it in the book and it's in the subtitle, is the good life. Is like the good
Mm-hmm.
life for Aristotle, the way he used that term was the complete life. And that's the life of it, of beyond just life satisfaction. It's like whatever's going on at work, or or whatever it might be, whatever challenges, that you find a level of peace, virtues, things that that regardless of what's happening, that you're still happy, right? You still find this level
Mm-hmm.
of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And when people can get to that, and that's super, like that is so hard to do, right? That's really like,
Yeah.
I'm not, I make it sound simple, but it's very difficult to do. That's why I wrote the book, is like,
Yeah.
okay, lean into these 8 laws, start deciding what the good life looks for you,
Mm-hmm.
and blocking out your time to create,
Mm-hmm.
doing a lot of these little things, because it's not just one silver bullet. There's no such thing when it comes to our happiness.
Right.
It's kind of lean
Right.
in. I love this book. This is the book that changed things for me, The Happiness Advantage, by
Hmm.
Sean Acor. It's my first introduction to positive psychology. I read it in 2017. That's how I found the program, the UPenn program, because he mentions Marty's
Hmm.
work in that book at Dr. Seligman. And so the advantage to happiness, or those who are the most happy, find happiness regardless of circumstance.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Is that
No.
that's the advantage, and that's the advantage that Sean Acor talks about, is that they find that happiness because they're creating space for it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they're like on the agency side of it. They're not blaming other people when things go bad.
Mm.
They're
Yeah.
owning
Yeah.
it. That
Yeah.
that lifts our well-being when there's a lot of confidence that comes from owning our own
Mm-hmm.
choices, right? That we're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
looking for other people to point fingers at. Um, there's our habits, right? If we are consistently, I'm not just talking about exercise and journaling and those kinds of habits, but habits of love, you
Hmm.
know, of 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 treating people with kindness, um, habits of leadership,
Mm-hmm.
spirituality, which might be meditation for some people. Uh, you know, those are all the 24 character strengths that Chris Peterson and Martin Seligman kind of established. If we're doing those kinds of things, that's leading with happiness and being happy regardless of circumstance. So that if I have those habits, or I've got the space to create, or that I own my choices, if I'm doing those on a consistent daily basis, and someone close to me passes away, how better off am I prepared to deal with that
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty? That thing
Mm-hmm.
that just happened, that would have been extremely difficult if I hadn't been doing any of those things up to that point. And so for an entrepreneur, we deal with uncertainties constantly. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
always hitting us. But if you're doing those little things that I just mentioned, those uncertainties don't become that big of a deal, or as big of a deal.
Yeah.
You just kind of go, that's life, and I'm just going to roll with it. I'm going to rise above it. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not, this happiness of this like roller coaster happiness is what we usually
Yeah.
deal with. What
Yeah.
if we were able to consistently elevate that and keep it at a fairly consistent level, regardless of what's happening around us? I know it sounds like
Yeah.
utopia, but I know people who've gotten there, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
there myself. So
Yeah. So, you mentioned earlier about kind of taking responsibility about how you feel about things. And I would say for me personally, that that was one of the biggest, I suppose, improvements to my life. Was I was never much of a blaming other people on an extreme level.
Yeah.
But once I took responsibility of how I felt about certain things, about certain people, about certain situations, and my mental health improved, and I was certainly much happier.
Yeah.
Right, I was
Yeah.
I took stock of my ability or my responsibility to react to certain
Yeah.
things, and it it as much as a whole new world could open to based on that, it was
Yeah.
kind of a whole new world because
Oh yeah. It's
man,
huge.
uh,
It's huge in
things,
sports. It's huge
yeah,
in, I just,
right.
the great, the GOAT Brady, of football. I just heard just the other day, a quote from him saying that, don't, when you are, a player on the team and you're not getting as much playing time, the go-to is typically, oh, the coaches don't like me as much as the other team members. Or, and he started quoting all these things where you're really blaming or you're looking for
Mhm,
reasons, rather than just going out there making the choice. When I get the opportunity to play, I'm going to give it my all,
mhm,
and
mhm,
so it's I thought it was wonderful. And Tom Brady, obviously, that's how he lived his career
mhm.
and was able to elevate his career and create some happiness around that, right? And
Yeah.
that can't be understated. I call entrepreneurial
Mhm,
agency, the keystone of all the laws, because it
mhm,
really
mhm,
holds them all together. Because without it,
mhm.
if we don't choose all those other laws, like agencies choosing to do all those things,
Right,
right?
right,
So
right, right.
yeah,
Yeah. Before we get into the lightning round of questions, and I think we can be here for hours and hours discussing the
yeah,
8 laws.
yeah. Thank you.
But I would encourage the listeners probably to pick up your book that's coming out soon, and have that at least for reference. For if they're looking to implement these 8 laws. But before
Yeah,
we kind of get into the lightning round question, what are some parting thoughts you want to share to our listeners about these 8 laws or habits and practices that can help
yeah.
people get out of burnout and increase their happiness in their life?
Yeah, I would tell the listeners, I mean, if they go to entrethrive.com/intentional, I believe is the one that is the URL that you can even put that in the show notes there,
Mm-hmm.
that where they can download the Entre Clarity Guide. Obviously, can order the book from the site, but Entre Clarity Guide is a free download. It helps them establish their guiding truths. There's a guide there that and their next breakaway, which is a term I use a
Mm-hmm.
lot, to break
Mm-hmm.
free from their past and lean into their future. And so that guide, I think, would be really helpful because that's the crawl part of all the laws. Entre clarity, or
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial clarity, is we've got to start somewhere. Let's start with getting clear on what we want and what's important to
Mm-hmm.
us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my parting words, is like, that's where you should start.
Yeah. Thanks, Aaron Marcum of Entree Thrive. And before we head out, I do want to get you into the hot seat of lightning round questions. Are
Yeah,
you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So, first question is, who do you look up to?
My parents.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a common answer, but yes.
What is the best business advice you've ever received?
Your business is a vehicle to freedom, not the other way
Mm-hmm.
around. You're not the servant to your business, but your business is the vehicle to freedom.
What is your favorite business book?
The business book that started it all for me as an entrepreneur is Good to Great, Jim Collins.
Mm, yep.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the term 3 feet from gold?
Yeah, I've heard it before. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, if you're familiar with it, how do you know as an entrepreneur when you might just be 3 feet from gold or when to pivot in your business?
For me, it's always feedback. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
know feedback from my customers, from even my team members and employees. I ran a satisfaction management firm for years in the home
Mm-hmm.
care. That's what my 10x that company anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing the feedback and getting that feedback early on so you can pivot
Mm-hmm.
accordingly. Yeah. as well as know if what you're doing is working. So,
Mm-hmm. If you could do one thing over again, what would it be?
one thing over again, I would start my path to personal flourishing long before 2015.
Mm-hmm.
I would start it in 2002 when I first started my
Yeah.
company. Like, even as an aspiring entrepreneur, I would have tried to been more laser focused on that.
Right.
Yeah.
You lose everything in your business, but the only thing you have left is your computer, laptop, cell phone, and internet connection. How do you rebuild your business in 30 days?
Well, that's easy. Not necessarily easy. I wouldn't say it's easy, but because I still have my relationships, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some of the best relationships, and so I would go to my connections, my top connections. First, I'd find a frustration that I could build a business
Mm-hmm.
plan from, give them a pitch, and I get investors in those 30 days and just launch another business because they trust me that I would be successful at it. So,
What's the biggest challenge in your business today?
biggest challenge is that I'm going to rephrase this one. I was thinking of something different, but the biggest challenge for me is helping entrepreneurs connect the dots from creating their good life to financial freedom. Like, one cannot survive without the other. And I guess I created some financial freedom, but not the freedom that I later created when I really leaned into the good life, like that hockey stick growth.
Stick growth.
Yeah.
All right. And the last question is, what's the best thing you spent on $100 or less on that has greatly improved your personal life or your business life?
Okay. I have it right here. It's also a book I also recommend, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. So that's really changed me. I've just recently been diving into that. So I'm almost done with it. So good
All
book.
right. Thank you, Aaron, author of Entree Thrive, which is going to come out. By the time people hear this, it'll probably be out already. But if our listeners want to get in contact with you or see what you have out there besides the book, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
I just tell people to go to entrethrive.com. All of our social channels are there. I am on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Marcum on LinkedIn. But best way to get to that LinkedIn is just go to the website, entrethrive.com. And again, for your listeners, entrethrive.com/intentional to download that free tool, and they can navigate from the site from there. Learn more about the laws, order the book, all those things are there.
Awesome. Hey, we'll make sure
Yeah.
we put that link in the show notes.
Thank
Aaron,
you.
thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and hanging out with us. And hopefully we can talk again soon.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you.
All right.